Hi, my name is Daryl Rooks, and my topic is going to focus on the disparity amongst races when it comes to the childhood obesity rate itself. So, childhood obesity itself is on the rise in the United States, but the more worrying trend is that over time, it's still consistently had a large difference between races. Um, in the United States alone, at least 1/3 of the children are overweight and obese. Now, as of 2014, the number one health risk is no longer going to be drug abuse and smoking. It's obesity itself. That's including children and adults as well. But that shows later on why this is an issue. Obesity itself can help lead to cancers and diseases that you can see on your screen there, such as high blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol levels that are too high, as well as effects of depression, social anxiety, and just overall lack of being able to fit in. So that all directly correlates with children as well as adults. So the issues that we used to see in adults, we're now seeing at a much earlier age. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we are becoming obese at such a young age. Even by the time that we're only toddlers, 6 to 8 months, we are already obese. So that is directly correlating with the fact that now adults are getting all these issues much, much earlier. So the disparity itself is, you can see boys, and the age group that we're talking about here is all the way from 2 to 19. That is what is considered as children still, just by all polls and just the general consensus. That is what the general age group uses. So in this case, the boys that we're talking about here are from age 4 to 12. And as girls later on will be the same age. But they're facing obesity rates of 20% if they are black. Latinos or Hispanics face an obesity rate of 24%, and those that are non-Hispanic white have an obesity rate of 12.6%, and that is strictly with just the boys category from 4 to 12. Girls have a similar disparity, although not quite as big, where blacks and Latinas are both sitting around 21%, and whites are around 15.5%. So you can already see right off the bat that there is a gap between the races. If we're just even speaking between non-white and white, there's a gap already. For boys, it's almost double, and for girls, there's at least a 5% jump. And then one study has found that non-Hispanic blacks and Hispanic boys and girls were significantly more likely to be severely obese for age than compared to those that were non-Hispanic white boys and girls in that same group. Among the non-Hispanic white children and adolescents, the prevalence of obesity is increasing as income's decreasing. So, in general, as our income in the household is decreasing, the obesity rate is increasing. So that is a correlation that has been found, although it hasn't been concretely proven to be the number one reason why childhood obesity itself is on the rise. However, it does help allude to why there is a disparity amongst the races, and we'll touch upon that further into the presentation. So, part of the issue is education and income. So there's a significant difference in the level of education in a household that is black and Hispanic versus non-whites, and for reference, I threw in Asians as well. Asians have the lowest obesity rate, even across even across foreign land and within the United States. So you can see that less than 25% of blacks and less than 15% of Hispanics are achieving a degree of a bachelor or higher. Versus Hispanic whites is a third, and Asians is over half. And then if you look over to the right of the screen, you can see those same percentages reflected in that graph right there. That directly is then going to correlate with income. In general, the higher the education, the more income the household is bringing. So in 2014, the collected data showed that the median black household income was around $43,000, and a white household income had around $71,000. That's just the median income of the combined of the two. So that trend has persisted since 1967, which was actually the first year that they even started collecting the median rate. So obviously, because of slavery and other issues, that has always been a case, but it's never not been a case. And then the same kind of trend applies for Hispanics. 43,300 is what they kind of make for their median age, or their income, excuse me, and that has persisted again over all the decades that it's been categorized. So this is directly relating obesity and the education to kind of tie those two together as part of the reason why not only is it an issue, but it's a current issue, because these are the current numbers that we're looking at today. So not only is it just information that helps tie reasons why childhood obesity disparity exists among races, but it's also tying it into the current events that are happening. Essentially, these walls of text mean boys that are non-white, that their highest household is less than a high school degree, is all the way up at 22% obesity. So anytime that there is the lesser education, the higher the obesity rate. Versus in those same boys, the prevalence is 11% of obesity, or 12% obesity with college degrees. So there is almost double the chance of obesity, regardless of race, when it comes to education amongst boys. And then girls, it's a very similar number. So what that really means is that the education itself is tied into the obesity rate. Is it the number one correlating factor? Not necessarily, but it does show that the level of education is helping to lead to that disparity, because, like we had talked about in the previous slide, there is a big difference in education levels when it comes to non-Hispanic whites and non-whites. So that is a direct correlation as to why that disparity exists. And it also, studies have shown that Black and Hispanic women are more likely to be obese as they get pregnant when compared to non-Hispanic whites. So as previously discussed, childhood obesity can lead to many, many health risks. While not all of them will be immediate as we're children, they do have long-standing consequences as we grow older. Some of the issues touching again: hypertension, diabetes, adverse outcomes that are physical and psychosocial, like we said. So you can have anxiety, depression, just based off your looks, just social isolation, as kids tend to grow into trends and groups as they're growing older, and oftentimes they will exclude people based off of physical looks. That's just what kids do. Part of the risk factors that they've kind of found, researchers have found, is that the number of hours spent watching TV is directly associated with obesity rate, as well as sleep duration and sugar consumption. And they found again that in Black and Hispanic children, all of these rates were higher compared to those of non-whites. And that continues from the children all the way up until the youth age. So again, there's another reason why the disparity is happening, and that the disparity is continuing to happen because these are continuing trends. All these trends have just continued to worsen, and that's apparent because our obesity rate has gone from 1 in 8 children to 1 in 5 children to now 1 in 3 children overweight. So obviously these trends are continuing and they're not stopping. They're going down the same exact path over and over again. It also shows that Hispanic and Black youth eat fast food more often and also display lower levels of physical activity. So again, more risk factors and more factors as to why that disparity is existing. Some of the worrying trends, touching again, not Hispanics' diets have transitioned into something worse. They are eating worse, according to studies that were taken. They just have found that diet trends are worse amongst the Hispanic community. As well as there's cultural differences that can be defined, or their perception of the human body is different amongst cultures. You can see that stat there. They found that 5 to 10-year-old African American children were 90% of boys and 80% of girls, they were obese. They were considered obese or very obese based off their BMI. However, only a third of those parents actually even thought their children were overweight. So that's also worrying, because to be obese and severely obese, you need to be in the 95th to 97th percentile of the BMI. So you are the top of the top obese, and for only 30% of the parents to even consider them even overweight is a worrying trend. And that's kind of why the issue has continued to happen. That perception is part of what needs to be changed. Intervention programs have been put into place in communities. There's 10 specific programs that have been proven to work and have been approved by the Task Force on Community Preventative Services, which is a group that's funded by the government, the U.S. government. These interventions, they focus on physical activity, diet changes, and your social environment around you, how you're surrounding yourself. However, they find issues implementing them into all programs. Not all schools can afford them, and in general, schools with lower income are have higher attendance rates of non-blacks, or of non-whites, excuse me. They've also found Choose My Plate is a government option. It shows food pyramid, food sources, healthy eating, and healthy habits. Prevention techniques are just going to be increasing physical activity, changing our diets and our lifestyles as well. So some of the recommendations that I have really go into, most of it is just education. Everything else that you see on there kind of falls under the category of education. We need to be educated on what we're putting in our bodies, how it affects us, and how bad obesity really is for us. It has nothing to do with fat shaming or anything of that sort, or appropriating human bodies. It's about the health of humans. By no means by saying, oh my God, that person is overweight or obese, doesn't mean that they need to be like perfectly in shape like a fitness model. No, it's just about being healthy. So we need to have the education set in place, whether that's through different programs as we're growing up, so that parents are educated or kids are educated, so by the time they become parents, they can teach it to their kids as well. Health needs to be having more of an emphasis in the public eye, which it doesn't have. It's slowly starting to, but the rate of obesity is just so high now that it's going to take a very long time. But it is good to see that we are moving on the right path. And overall, it's just changing our lifestyles and really focusing on eating better, being more active, encouraging activities together as families. So those are some of the recommendations, and some of them are put in place as well. And that was my project, and thank you very much.